It's very clear in the readings today of Scripture that we are invited to learn forgiveness. And in the spiritual life, forgiveness is absolutely essential. Jesus teaches if we want to be filled with God's love and mercy, we have to extend it to others. But it's one of the most challenging things we do as a Christian. So that's kind of the end of our spiritual growth. In the beginning of the year, I want us to invite us to kind of start growing together. If you want to go deeper, Father John Paul writes in the bulletin, calls it his weekly brew. So he reflects on this need for forgiveness, and he invites us. So read the bulletin. You can find it online or take it at the door. But today I want to start with a simple question to kind of kick off the academic year. What's a passion you have? What's something that you really enjoy? Something when you get into it, you kind of lose yourself. You really get into the flow of it. What's something that you delight in? The word delight is beautiful. It means to be led out of ourselves. What's something you really enjoy? In Spanish, people say something that calls your attention. In Mexico, I often hear, me llamo mi atención. It calls my attention. What's something that draws you out of yourself, that you rejoice in, that you delight in? A passion for you. I'm going to invite you to share with a neighbor, to turn to someone. Okay, we're a big congregation. I know this is a delight and a joy. We're going to get very loud. When people share their passions, all of a sudden it gets really loud in here. I'm going to invite you, do your best. Speak as softly as you can. Use those really inside voices. But I'm going to invite you right now to share with a neighbor. Maybe it's a good time to reach out, stand up, walk over to someone new, or just turn to your neighbor. I'm going to give you 1 minute to share a passion that you have. Then I'm going to try to interrupt. It's going to be loud in here. Exchange, change, and then make sure the other person talks. Okay, you ready? Everyone stand up. I got a stopwatch. 1 minute, share your passion, reach out to someone new, say your name, and share your passion. Go. Okay, make sure you exchange. Talk to someone different. Talk to the other person. Don't forget to say your name. Okay, let's come back. We can be seated again. Let's come back to your seats. Let's come back and have a seat now. It's great. Yeah, we all want to kind of keep talking. It's wonderful to share our passions. Maybe it's a little harder for some of us to do. Kind of twisted someone's arm to do it. But there's passions deep down. I twisted someone's arm, they're joking around, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, there is a passion here. Let me share it. And when you share your passions, it kind of brings out something deep inside of you. And I don't know about you, but when I hear about people's passions, it inspires me. It encourages me. What do I hold closely? And so it's a good invitation. But guess what? It's also part of our spiritual journey. We need to be drawn out of ourselves to God. God is so far beyond our understanding. I'll even just say, God is love, God is mercy, but we don't know what that means in God. It's so far beyond our experience. But our experience helps us draw us out. That's why it's important to reflect on what do we delight in, what do we draw in. I found as a Dominican now, I'm a friar of the Order of Preachers. That means I'm a religious brother. Been reflecting on prayer for almost 20 years now. And in prayer, we always need to come back to our delight, to what draws us out of ourselves. It's also very important in the university community. You reach times of burnout. It could happen, they call it senioritis. It happens for graduate students in their fourth year of grad school. For sure, when you're writing your dissertation, there's burnout. And we need to come back to the original thing that called us out, that brought us to a university community. And a university community is a place we're invited to grow. A university is a study in a microcosm of the entire universe. The entire universe. By its definition, it's bigger than us. None of us can hold the whole of science, of understanding everything in the universe all together. We need to go beyond ourselves. And so we come to a university, we come with our understanding and knowledge and come from our hometowns and our place, and we're ready to be drawn out of ourselves. That's what we do in a university community, and grow in that knowledge. But also a university forms good citizens. Forms citizens. That's what we do as a church, to form good people. We also call those good people, though, saints. Those who are able to love God, to love, as Jesus says, to love like myself, to become forgiving, to become loving like Jesus. He said, the commandment I give you, love one another as I love you. As we're drawn out of ourselves, as we are drawn into formation, that is the goal. And so you see that goal, that passion, helps us grow. I'll just say in the beginning of the year, I'll share one little passion of mine, one big passion of mine, but the deep passion I have is the ocean. I grew up in California where I fell in love with the ocean. My family would take us camping every summer, and usually to the ocean. We could kind of drive to the ocean somewhere. And all my siblings, my two sisters and a brother, we all loved swimming. So we'd be out swimming in the waves and swimming in the ocean. And as little kids, we'd be there at the waves, watching the waves come in, and we love to taunt the ocean. We're like, that's it? That's all the waves you got? That's a small wave. Come on, give us a bigger wave. And we taunt the ocean, until all of a sudden a big wave would come and wash us out. And in a child's delight, we'd be giggling, just getting rolled by the ocean waves. And in fact, that's why I love the ocean. It just has a power. It showed me that we have to be humble. The ocean is so powerful, so big, beyond ourselves. So I love the ocean. I have to admit, I also love the ocean. Go warm up, get the towel, and warm up in the sun. Where else can you just lay on the beach, lay down, do nothing, and feel like an accomplished day? So I love the ocean. But I turned that love into a desire to study. I decided oceanography. Oceanography is studying the whole ocean, kind of use my aptitude for math and abstract thinking, and understand how the ocean works. That's what oceanography is. And even as a young, probably like just going into high school, I thought, I want to study the ocean and try to give glory to God by those studies, by explaining the science. That was my idea, but you know how life is, there's twists and turns. Felt like I had a little setback. The first one is I moved from my family from California to New Mexico, 1,000 miles from the ocean now, and I couldn't afford to go out of state, and so I decided to start in engineering in New Mexico. Made good friends at New Mexico State and went into engineering, but with my good friends and liking the place there, I didn't want to transfer to oceanography, so I waited. I waited and got a degree and then got job offers back in Silicon Valley and started working as an engineer. But there was something missing. There was a love that I had and just work. There was something missing in my life. And I said, well, I'll check out oceanography and maybe I'll do an application and see if I get into grad school, then maybe that's a sign. I applied to grad school. I was probably a little cocky. I said, I'm an engineer. I could do anything in your lab. You should let me come to graduate school. I got rejected. They said, you need to go back and apply again next year. What do you want to work on? Not just what can you work on, what do you want to work on? In fact, I think the oceanography department was saying, what are you passionate about? And so in my dejection, I just went on surfing the internet, like, what am I going to do? I started looking at oceanography programs, and all of a sudden I saw a job offering. Engineer, willing to go to sea, work on a research ship, and work on a manned submersible, the submarine Alvin, taking scientists to the seafloor, 10,000 feet deep, to study the hydrothermal vents. Suddenly I was faced with taking top scientists to the seafloor to explore the hydrothermal vents, or where the volcanoes come close to the sea surface, superheats the water, and creates this environment. Scientists until then, 1977, thought everything has to live off the sun, photosynthesis. But there on the seafloor with the chemicals, new life was found that lives off chemicals called chemosynthesis. So I got to see the science, and I started meeting very inspiring professors in oceanography. But I also witnessed in life, even in science, that there's politics. People are kind of driven by ego, trying to outdo each other. Who's the principal investigator so they can bring in the money that they need for their research? And so things were driving in competition, ego. I remember being young and kind of bursting my bubble of like, gosh, even in science, there's all this competition and politics. We know this is part of life. There's all these conflicts in life. And it's hard to keep that same desire. I met one oceanographer. He said, you should come to graduates. You should come to oceanography. This is our job, is not to get jaded. It's a beautiful insight by another oceanographer. Our job in life, not to get jaded, to hold on to those desires, to learn, to grow, even to understand how life works. Okay, there is politics, there is fights, people are ego-driven, but to rise above that. I think that's the invitation of our church, that's the invitation of Christ, to hold us back to those original desires. And those desires then are a pathway to God. God leads us out of ourselves, even out of our studies, into God's presence. As Dominicans, we have a famous Dominican, St. Thomas Aquinas, who wrote about these pathways to God. You might have heard the 5 proofs of God by Thomas Aquinas, right? I'd actually argue it's not 5 proofs. The Latin word is cinque via. It means 5. Via is ways, a road. In Latin, in Rome, you would say the via, whatever, via conciliazione. The via is a road. This is a pathway to God. So our desires, even our understanding, is a pathway to God. You know, all science, we have to look around, what can we sense, and then determine what we can't see. A lot of science you can't actually see. A lot of people tell me in oceanography, it's like, oh, that subject, no one's discovered only, what, about 5%? We know more about outer space than oceans, right? Many of you said that to me, right? It's not true. In all science, we use our understanding to move from the known to the unknown. We know the ocean. We don't know it in the same way where we just look at everything. Light only travels in the ocean 30 feet. But we know it by sound. By the sound to the acoustics, we can study that. And that's how we do in all our degrees. We have to move from the known to the unknown to move to the unseen. And God is the ultimate unseen, but God makes him present through others. Here at the Mass, we celebrate God's grace coming at this altar. And in a special way today in baptism, we celebrate in that water, your children will be transformed to a child of God. And guess what, parents and godparents? You also have to be a pathway to God. It's quite an opportunity. You know, when your child says, Mommy, Daddy, they're actually calling on God. They're looking to you in the place of God to have that presence of God. That's an amazing thing, but it's also a responsibility. You have to channel that presence of God, channel that patience that we heard about today, channel that love, channel that mercy. It's an invitation for all of us to move from our original desire to move out in studies in the university community and reach out to finally God. It'll help us become better people, to become saints.